Welcome to We Make to Build, a podcast by the Committee for European Construction Equipment, CECE. We are the industry organization representing construction equipment manufacturers towards the European Union institutions. The construction equipment sector, it's people, it's innovation, it's young talent, it's us. We produce advanced machinery to build the future of Europe. CECE Podcast, We Make to Build, is a series of episodes, each focusing on a different topic under the umbrella of our motto, We Make to Build.
Hello everyone, and welcome to the second episode of the CECE Podcast, #We Make to Build. My name is Riccardo Viaggi, I'm the General Secretary of CECE, and I have the pleasure of hosting this episode today. Today's episode is focused on the role of the future machinery regulation. The machinery regulation is the most important piece of legislation for CECE members. And this is why today we are going to discuss this key regulation with two very relevant guests. I will have with me Barbara Bonvissuto, who is Head of Unit at the European Commission Department for Growth and Industry, and a member of the European Parliament, Mr. Štefanec. I will be discussing with them the proposal that the European Commission put on the table in April and how the European Parliament has already started to look at this proposal. Indeed, this proposal will now be the focus of a very long legislative process, which will involve also the European Council as the representative of the member states. These two are called the co-legislators and will work on the proposal put forward by the European Commission. But as I said first, let's discuss and let's see the key topics of the proposal put forward by the European Commission. And for that, I am joined by Barbara Bonvissuto, Head of Unit at DG Grow. She's in charge of machinery and equipment in the ecosystem for construction and machinery at DG Grow in the European Commission. Welcome, Barbara.
Good afternoon, Riccardo, and thank you very much for this invitation. Obviously very timely in the context of the current negotiations, and I hope that will help also dispel some of the concerns that industry may have around our proposal.
Indeed, there are some concerns, but there are also very many doubts, but also interest around this regulation, this legislative proposal. And I would like to spell them with you indeed, and to give you the opportunity to spell them for our members. I would like to get started by a very general question. The machinery regulation is about safety, but industrial competitiveness and industrial resilience are keywords of this European Commission, especially after COVID, I would say. My question is, how does the Commission, how do you, as head of unit in this capacity, strike the balance between safety and industrial competitiveness, as you are the lead civil servant on this key legislation?
Thank you for this question. Well, I have to say that obviously safety is the primary objective of this piece of legislation, but competitiveness is equally one, and I would not put them in opposition, the other way around. I think that as any other piece of safety legislation within the EU, it is also, and regulatory framework in general is one of the most important element for a competitive and vibrant economy, especially when we are talking about legislation which is conducive to innovation, which we believe is the case for the Machinery Directive, and it's the objective or one of the objectives which have inspired the current legislation. So first of all, how do we ensure competitiveness? First of all, by making sure that the regulatory framework is still conducive to a smooth functioning of the internal market. The internal market is an asset for industry, It's an asset in terms of ensuring competitiveness, and we can only exploit the full potential of the internal market if there are no obstacles. And no obstacles not only means common rules, but also commonly understood and implemented rules. Now, when it comes to new technologies, since they were not contemplated in the current machinery directive, because obviously we are talking about technologies which have emerged after its adoption, it is of utmost importance that there is a clear understanding of how the legal framework applies to new technologies. If then the national authorities, they have different interpretation, the manufacturers then may be faced with different rules when they want to place their products on the market. And also the consumers will not be reassured. Having common rules, having clarity, legal certainty is important for the manufacturers, so that they are able then to introduce new technologies on the market without any issue. It's important for the consumer to create this system of trust with respect to new technologies. But I would say the same also applies to the existing technologies. We were faced with rules not always commonly interpreted and applied. I take the example of the substantial modification, the partially completed machinery. So the certain of the amendments which we have included in the proposal to add new definitions or to clarify existing ones, they also go into that direction of ensuring legal certainty, which in turn is a fundamental element for competitiveness and for level playing field. One should not forget that though likely we are main exporters of machinery, we always have shown positive trade balance with our main partners. We are also importing machinery. And it's important that the rules are clear so that I would say less scrupulous manufacturers from third countries do not abuse from the uncertainty or unclarity in our system. So competitiveness in the sense of ensuring a smooth functioning internal market, competitiveness in the sense of ensuring full legal certainty, and competitiveness also because we have taken on board certain requests from industry. For example, on the digital documentation, we have taken on board the request from industry that this should be the default option, how to provide the documentation. It should be digital, and it's only upon request that then paper information should be provided. So these are only a few examples on which show how important and how present has been in our work the need to ensure that this piece of legislation support or continues to support the competitiveness of such an important sector for the EU economy, while at the same time always obviously ensuring a high level of safety.
Thank you very much for this very clear response. My second question goes into a little bit more of detail on one of the most talked about changes in this revision of the machinery directive, this machinery products regulation. I would like to ask you, why did you consider to include such a radical change compared to the existing machinery directive as obligatory third-party certification? Is there some way that the European CE marking model is under discussion, is being questioned here? Can you give us some element of response to that, please?
Yeah, sure. And thank you for the question. And I know this is one of the elements which has raised most concern. So I think it is important here that we clarify why we are doing that. One of the objectives which is uncontested of this revision and even supported by the stakeholders is the alignment of the legal framework to the new legislative framework. by aligning to the general horizontal views on product legislation, we would provide elements of simplification or clarification or consistency, especially since many of the products which are covered by the machinery legal framework, they are also covered by other legal framework, and therefore it is important for the manufacturers, for the national authorities, that the rules are coherent and consistent among those other legal frameworks. Now, the new legislative framework foresees different modules, conformity assessment modules, on the basis of the level of risk or hazard. This is something which has been implemented in several pieces of legislation. I mean, you can find, according to the level of risk, a third-party requirement for third-party certification, for example, with pressure equipment, with personal protective equipment, gas appliances, lifts, cableways, etc. I mean, the list is quite long. And here the reasoning is the same. If there is a category of machinery which has been considered to present higher risks or hazards, then it is logical, according to the general scheme on the certification or the conformity assessment of products, it is normal to foresee there the intervention of an impartial third party. There was quite some request from national authorities to introduce this requirement on the basis of evidence they collected on the nature of the risks and in certain cases leading to injuries and deaths, on the number of machinery which had to be withdrawn from the market, and you can see a trace of that in the RAPEX notification. And one of the findings of the national authorities is that in certain cases, when the harmonized standards are available, they are not fully applied, or they are not correctly applied. And that has been in particular the case with respect to products which are imported from third countries and manufacturers which may not have the correct expertise to apply in the correct way the standards. So introducing third party is a way to ensure, to fully ensure safety. It's in line with what is already applied in many other pieces of legislation, so not at all presenting a threat to the CE marking, as this is the practice in several other pieces of legislation enforcing the CE marking. It's a way to ensure level playing field. Then maybe also let me stress that according to the findings of our impact assessment, with respect to the products which would be covered by this new requirement, in practice already today, even if there is no formal obligation, 50%, so half of the conformity assessment procedure, are already carried out by the manufacturers, so on a voluntary basis with the request of intervention of third parties. And it's in particular the SMEs who are resorting to that option. So to sum up, in no way that constitutes a threat to the CE marking. On the contrary, it's the alignment of the machinery legal framework to the new legislative framework. And what we are doing is based on the assessment of the level of risk and hazard and linked to the problems encountered on the market, leading to withdrawal or certain dangerous products. There are mechanisms which we have foreseen to revise the list of this high-risk machinery and to update it, remove or add products, but I may come later to that aspect.
Thank you. That is indeed very important as well. Thank you for that last reminder that this list is an evolving list. It's important to understand how these products can get into that list, but also can get out of that list. I would like to switch to another important area of your proposal, which is this somehow parallel system of harmonized standardization, which is the power for the European Commission to draft technical specifications when a standard is missing, is being drafted, is needed but is not present, let's say. My first question is who would draft these technical specifications on behalf of the Commission or within the Commission? And isn't this some form of bypassing the standardization system that is being created here?
Thank you for this question. And there, let me stress upfront that we are not intending to put into question the standardization system, nor are we intending to put into question the very important role of standards in support of our legal framework. We believe that the new approach is still very much valid with the legal requirements, I would say high-level essential requirements set out in a legal text, and then the technical specifications left to standards which are developed by the stakeholder community. This being said, it's also true that there are certain shortcomings in the standardization system. We are, in fact, working on a possible standardization strategy. There are sure things which have worked well, and there are things which have worked less well. And we are working in order to make sure that the standardization system remains fit for the needs it is supposed to deliver on. Now, we experienced cases where standards which were requested or needed were not available in time. We have cases, we can give examples, or where standards were recognized to be outdated. We were giving transitional time to update them, but then after transitional time expired, the standards were still not updated. Unfortunately, recently, we have also assisted at examples of where we have issued standardization requests, and the standardization requests were not accepted, were rejected by the standardization organization. Now, hopefully, we are still talking about a limited number of cases. And again, we are doing all the best with the reflection and the standardization strategy to make sure these do not happen in the future. Still, the risk is still there. So here what we are trying to do is just to have a fallback option in case there's a critical, for example, safety need and standards are not delivered, or there's a standardization request which for one reason or the other cannot be accepted. As the regulators, we have the right to equip ourselves with the means to be able to deliver and to come up with technical specifications if the standards are not available. The first and privileged route will always be the one of standards. This is only a fallback option that we hope we don't need to activate, but as regulators and then I guess also Parliament and Council as the co-legislators, I think we have the duty. It's not only a right, but the duty to equip ourselves with means to be able to set out specifications which may be critical for safety reasons if the standards are not available. In that case, and that was your first question, if standards are not available, then the Commission can decide to set out technical specifications. This technical specification will be developed in consultation, as for all the other, delegated implementing acts, in consultation with relevant stakeholders and with the national authorities. And the privileged forum for that consultation will be the expert group on machinery. So it will be absolutely transparent process with the participation of all concerned stakeholders. But again, let me repeat it once more. We would hope that we do not need to activate that process.
Thank you very much. Very clear once again, and we're nearing the end of our chat. One last question, which is really interesting for us, is what you're expecting from industry representatives like CECE in the foreseeably long negotiation period that is coming up on this piece of legislation.
Yeah, and thank you for this question, and because I take it as an offer to indeed help us in this negotiation process, which I hope will not be too long. I see that both institutions are working hard on the file, and well, it's a bit premature to say, but I would guess that there may be limited issues which may be controversial in the end. Now, what would be important, I think, from your side would be indeed to support us in a constructive way along the negotiations, especially when some sort of technical expertise or evidence is needed. I was referring earlier to this this annex on high-risk machinery and the fact that we may be able to revise it, and that I think it would be important for you to start collecting the evidence, for example, in one direction or the other. I mean, if it is to add items or to remove items from the list. We are discussing, for example, on the new technologies, the artificial intelligence systems of the software, to what extent they need to be classified as high risk, if they impact the safety functions of a machinery. There, I think that also your input would be interesting to have in terms of the examples of how you're using artificial intelligence in your machinery and to what extent you're using these new technologies with respect to safety functions. So I think that it would be very important if we can pass a message that we could count on you in terms of having the needed required expertise and technical input when it comes to the negotiations of these issues. In general, maybe also to help understand. I understand that now you're mainly concerned about the certain proposal that may you perceive as having potentially negative impact. But I think it would help if you look at the whole proposal in a kind of holistic way, and that my messages that I try to pass on in reply to your first question were understood, and also that the importance of certain changes would be, and also the reasoning for certain changes would be understood fully.
Thank you very much indeed. I think that is definitely the case, and I think this contribution of yours to our podcast will have helped and will help our members in understanding the Commission thoughts, the Commission's approach, and I think the offer indeed to continue collaborating, most of all on the more technical aspects, is definitely a welcome offer, and is an offer we definitely receive and appreciate. I would like to thank you once again for taking the time to speak to our audience, and we definitely will remain in touch on this issue.
Thank you very much from my side as well.
Thank you for tuning into our podcast. Take a moment to visit cece.eu/podcast to listen to other episodes. And now, back to the conversation.
Having heard from the European Commission, time now to go to one of the legislating institutions of the European Union. That is the European Parliament. And we now have no one else than the rapporteur. This is the jargon word that we use in Brussels for the lead MEP on the specific file. MEP is, of course, short for Member of European Parliament. And we have a pleasure to host on this podcast Ivan Štefanec, who is a member of the European Parliament from the EPP, the People's Party, and he is indeed the lead rapporteur on this file. Welcome, Mr. Štefanec.
Thank you very much for your kind invitation. I really do appreciate it, and it's my pleasure.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions I would like to go through to understand your role, your point of view as a politician and as the leading MEP on this file, to understand a little bit about your role and a little bit about your point of view. So let's start from a pretty general question. Why do you think this regulation is so important in your view, from a political point of view, from an economic point of view? Can you give us a sense of why this is so important?
Sure. I do believe this regulation is very, very important because machinery sector is really an essential part of the engineering industry and one of the industrial pillars of the European economy. And the proposed revision came 15 years after the adoption of the Machinery Directive, which is currently in force, reflecting the Commission Work Programme 2020 under the priority Europe Fit for Digital Age. In parallel, the Commission proposed a new Artificial Intelligence Act with the main goal to reflect the change of the digital transition and the impact of new technologies on the Union product safety legislation. We were introducing a regulatory framework for placing machinery on the single market, ensuring its free movement and a high level of protection for users and other persons exposed to machinery products. I find it very important to consider changes to its legislative framework with due care in order to secure sustainable recovery from the COVID-19 crisis. At the same time, we want to keep the motivation for the innovation and new design development. And finally, we want to keep European producers and designers competitive at the global level playing field. As we understood the importance of the report, we carried out a broad consultation with stakeholders, listening to the views and needs of the manufacturers, notified bodies, and consumers, comparing their views with the views of the Commission as well.
Thank you very much for a very clear introduction and for very clearly stating the importance of this legislation. You have already hinted at the fact that you have put forward your report and at the importance of involving all stakeholders' views in that report. And I would like to get very quickly to that report. We as a CECE and other industry association are very clearly attached to the point of third-party third-party certification obligations. And in that sense, we have welcomed your position that you stated in your draft report to delete this third-party certification obligation. Is this, in your point of view, one of the main points you want to address in your approach as the lead MEP on this file?
Yes, this is one of the most important points, but basically I have to say I welcome the Commission proposal for a regulation on machinery products, and I fully support most of its aspects. For example, its alignment with the new legislative framework that brings coherence with the other legislative acts on product safety and horizontal transparency. I also support the conversion of the directive into a regulation as it facilitates uniform application across all EU member states and therefore the free movement of goods. So I try to address several key messages. I also clarify the scope, in particular with regard to the exclusion of motor vehicles from the regulation. In addition, I clarified several definitions such as safety component, substantial modification or manufacturer, to contribute to the clearer understanding of the enacting provisions. As the Commission proposal covers also so-called partly completed machinery, I consider it is important to make a clearer distinction between definitions applying to partly completed machinery and those applying to other categories of machinery products in area of the obligations, including conformity assessment procedures and other responsibilities of economic operators. I also try to redefine the term so-called high-risk machinery products by replacing it with so-called potentially high-risk machinery products. And I consider that machinery products placed nowadays on the market don't present very high risk by default, but only in certain situations. So in previous directive, it was named in a much more neutral way, just as so-called machinery listed in Annex 4. So as I propose to keep the possibility for the manufacturers to use also the internal production control procedures. And I'm convinced that there is not enough arguments to remove this option. Nevertheless, I want to keep in mind both the safety of machinery products and the machinery sector competitiveness and flexibility for innovation. So, in addition, keeping the possibility of using the internal production control procedure is very important for small and medium entrepreneurs. I return to the idea that all relevant technical documentation, assembly instructions, and declarations should be provided in digital or paper form during the whole life cycle of the product. And finally, I have extended the date of application of the regulation from 30 to 48 months after its entry into force. And in line with that, the transitional period was extended from 42 to 60 months as well. And the deadline for the Commission to present first report on the evaluation of the regulation was extended from 54 to 72 months.
Thank you. Thank you for a very clear overview of your main points. And thank you very much also for going back to this third-party certification obligations with the very important point connected to that on the risk, on the definition of high risk. Potentially high risk is definitely more in line with what we believe. With all these points, these many relevant points, possibly controversial within the parliament. But most of all, I would like to ask you how you think will be the setup of the negotiation that you will have to lead on behalf of the European Parliament with the European Council, the co-legislator, the representative of the member states. What do you think will be the most friction point? What will be the easiest point? And do you have any idea of how such a negotiation could last? How long it could last?
Well, that's the right question, because negotiation has started already, but I have a good feeling based on first exchange of views among political parties. I will see what real amendments brings from other political groups, but currently I know that there are more than 300 amendments already tabled. So I have to go through it and analyze their focus, but we have to come with final compromises until February 2022, and we plan to vote in the committee in March next year. So I do believe it will be a very interesting exchange of views, and I also believe that we will be able to keep our most important points in the report. I'm very optimistic currently based on first exchange of view, and as it is very, very technical report, I'm sure that we will have to manage several compromises and updates also in the annexes. So my main goal will be to preserve level of innovations and protection of European SMEs at the same time with workers' health protection.
Thank you very much for once again at the very end there stating once again the importance to balance so many political objectives, which is very much central to this debate and to the work of legislative authorities and politicians like you and your colleagues in the European Parliament are. You've also mentioned the fact that most of these points are very technical, and this probably joins the last question I wanted to ask, which is, what do you expect, or what would you like the role of industry associations to be during this negotiation? Is there a role for industry associations in the negotiation, in the preparation of the negotiation together with you?
Yes, industry representatives, they play a very important role in this process. I spent also 20 years of my previous careers in the industry, so I do understand the importance of its role. And until now, I have to say we have very good cooperation with all the partners, from industry, regulators, and the Commission as well. So I do believe we will communicate at such a good level even further, until we will come with a final proposal which will represent a suitable compromise for most stakeholders. And also my objective is that at the end we will come with very good directive for the future of European industry and for European citizens particularly.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Štefanec. And again, you are the MEP leading on the file, the so-called rapporteur. We have indeed already reviewed the reports that you put forward, and this is only the beginning of a very long process which you've just described. Once again, I would like to thank you on behalf of our listeners for taking the floor with us, and I wish you good luck for the very long period ahead.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for listening to this podcast on the machinery regulation and the point of view of CECE within it. I would like to invite you to visit cece.eu/podcast to listen to all other episodes, and more in general, to find out more about CECE, what we do, what we are, and why you should get involved. You should visit cece.eu or all our social media. Once again, thank you very much to our listeners, but also thank you very much to our guest speakers, and till next time.
Thank you for listening to our podcast We Make to Build, produced by the Committee for European Construction Equipment, CECE. Tune in to the rest of the episodes on cece.eu/podcast.